Imagine, for just a moment, the unthinkable. Not a slow, creeping dusk, not a gentle fade into twilight, but an instantaneous, absolute cessation. 1 second, the world is bathed in the familiar warmth and light of our star. The next, an impenetrable, suffocating blackness descends. The sun, our eternal, reliable life-giver, simply vanishes. This isn't the stuff of science fiction B-movies or a child's nightmare. This is a thought experiment that, for some reason, we collectively shy away from. It feels almost taboo, doesn't it? To even consider the possibility, however fleeting, that the very foundation of our existence could blink out. Why does this particular what-if scenario provoke such an uncomfortable unease? A deep-seated dread that other apocalyptic fantasies often fail to conjure? Perhaps it's because it strips away our most fundamental assumption. The sun will always rise. Could 10 minutes of solar absence truly unravel the fabric of our meticulously constructed modern world? Or is this just another exaggerated what if, designed more for shock value than genuine contemplation of our vulnerabilities? We're often told to focus on practical, immediate threats: climate change, pandemics, economic collapses. These are tangible, quantifiable dangers that we can theoretically plan for. But what if the greatest dangers, the most profound vulnerabilities, lie precisely in the scenarios we're conditioned to ignore? What if our collective dismissal of such impossible events is not a sign of resilience, but a symptom of a deeper systemic fragility, a willful blindness to the very foundations upon which our complex civilization rests? The sun. It's so constant, so pervasive, that we rarely give it a second thought beyond its role in our daily weather or our summer vacations. Yet its presence is the unseen, unheard hum that orchestrates nearly every aspect of life on Earth. It is the engine of photosynthesis, converting light into the energy that fuels entire ecosystems, from the smallest plankton to the largest redwood. It drives our weather patterns, warms our oceans, and maintains the delicate atmospheric balance that shields us from the vacuum of space. It's not just a giant lamp in the sky. It is the ultimate power source, the primordial clock, the silent guardian of our planet's rhythm. So, when that rhythm abruptly ceases, even for a mere 10 minutes, the physical effects would be instantaneous and catastrophic. The light, of course, would vanish first, plunging every corner of the globe into a darkness more profound than anything humanity has ever experienced. Then, the temperature. The upper atmosphere, suddenly deprived of solar radiation, would begin to cool with astonishing rapidity. On the surface, the heat stored in the ground and oceans would dissipate, but the immediate sensation would be a chilling, pervasive cold that would seep into everything. This isn't a gradual sunset. It's an immediate plunge into an environmental shockwave. 10 minutes. In cosmic terms, it's less than a blink. In biological and technological terms, it would be an eternity. There would be no grace period, no time for adaptation, no slow adjustment to a new reality. Just an instantaneous, brutal shift from life-sustaining warmth to an alien, hostile void. The psychological impact alone would be devastating. Imagine billions of people across every time zone thrust into absolute, impenetrable darkness. Panic would be instant and global. Societies, so reliant on visual cues, on established routines, on the simple comfort of knowing day from night, would fracture. The collective human mind, unprepared for such an existential assault, would reel. Simultaneously, our intricately woven technological networks would begin their cascade of failures. Solar power, a burgeoning source of clean energy, would simply cease to exist, instantly creating a massive deficit in the global grid. Conventional power stations, already under strain from the sudden, unprecedented demand for artificial light and heat in every home, every building, would falter and overload. The energy grid, our modern world circulatory system, would begin to collapse. And then, communication. Satellite systems, many of which rely on direct solar alignment for power and orientation, would go dark or become erratic. Ground-based networks, dependent on a stable power supply and facing unprecedented environmental stress, would quickly follow. The world, already plunged into darkness, would then go silent. No phones, no internet, no radio, just the chilling, suffocating quiet of a world cut off from itself, a planet suddenly alone in the vast cosmic ocean. So pervasive that we rarely give it a second thought beyond its role in our daily weather or our summer vacations. Yet its presence is the unseen, unheard hum that orchestrates nearly every aspect of life on Earth. It is the engine of photosynthesis, converting light into the energy that fuels entire ecosystems. From the smallest plankton to the largest redwood, it drives our weather patterns, warms our oceans, and maintains the delicate atmospheric balance that shields us from the vacuum of space. It's not just a giant lamp in the sky. It is the ultimate power source, the primordial clock, the silent guardian of our planet's rhythm. So, when that rhythm abruptly ceases, even for a mere 10 minutes, the physical effects would be instantaneous and catastrophic. The light, of course, would vanish first, plunging every corner of the globe into a darkness more profound than anything humanity has ever experienced. Then, the temperature. The upper atmosphere, suddenly deprived of solar radiation, would begin to cool with astonishing rapidity. On the surface, the heat stored in the ground and oceans would dissipate, but the immediate sensation would be a chilling, pervasive cold that would seep into everything. This isn't a gradual sunset. It's an immediate plunge into an environmental shockwave. 10 minutes. In cosmic terms, it's less than a blink. In biological and technological terms, it would be an eternity. There would be no grace period, no time for adaptation, no slow adjustment to a new reality. Just an instantaneous, brutal shift from life-sustaining warmth to an alien hostile void. The psychological impact alone would be devastating. Imagine billions of people across every time zone thrust into absolute, impenetrable darkness. Panic would be instant and global. Societies, so reliant on visual cues, on established routines, on the simple comfort of knowing day from night, would fracture. The collective human mind, unprepared for such an existential assault, would reel. Simultaneously, our intricately woven technological networks would begin their cascade of failures. Solar power, a burgeoning source of clean energy, would simply cease to exist, instantly creating a massive deficit in the global grid. Conventional power stations, already under strain from the sudden unprecedented demand for artificial light and heat in every home, every building, would falter and overload. The energy grid, our modern world's circulatory system, would begin to collapse. And then, communication. Satellite systems, many of which rely on direct solar alignment for power and orientation, would go dark or become erratic. Ground-based networks, dependent on a stable power supply and facing unprecedented environmental stress, would quickly follow. The world, already plunged into darkness, would then go silent. No phones, no internet, no radio, just the chilling, suffocating quiet of a world cut off from itself. A planet suddenly alone in the vast cosmic ocean. The sun's constant, unwavering presence is so deeply integrated into the very fabric of our existence that we seldom consciously acknowledge its silent, pervasive power. It's the ultimate conductor of Earth's symphony of life. From the microscopic ballet of photosynthesis in every leaf to the vast climatic systems that dictate our seasons and weather, without its energy, the intricate dance of life on our planet simply cannot occur. Photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into chemical energy, forms the absolute base of nearly every food web. It's not just about the food we eat. It's about the very air we breathe. Plants absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, maintaining the atmospheric composition essential for animal life. The sun's warmth drives the water cycle, evaporating water from oceans to form clouds, which then return as rain, nourishing land and replenishing freshwater sources. It warms our oceans, influencing currents and marine ecosystems. It is the anchor of our climate stability, a giant thermostat regulating Earth's temperature within a habitable range. Its steady, predictable illumination defines our days, guiding everything from human sleep cycles to the migratory patterns of birds. So, when this fundamental constant ceases, even for a fleeting 10 minutes, the consequences are not just profound but immediate. The light, of course, vanishes instantaneously, plunging the entire planet into an unnatural absolute blackness that would disorient and terrify. More critically, the thermal energy, which maintains the delicate balance of our atmosphere, begins to dissipate at an alarming rate. The upper atmosphere, directly exposed to the void, would experience a rapid, precipitous temperature drop. On the surface, while the oceans and land possess some thermal inertia, the sensation would be one of a chilling, pervasive cold that seeps into every crevice, every structure. This isn't the gradual, comforting descent into night. It is an abrupt, brutal shock to the system. 10 minutes, in the grand cosmic scheme, is an infinitesimal speck of time. Yet, for the complex biological and technological systems upon which we utterly depend, it would be an eternity. There would be no time to adapt, no grace period for adjustments, no slow acclimatization. Just an immediate, violent wrenching from a life-sustaining equilibrium into a hostile, alien void. This sudden onset of radical temperature shifts, coupled with the profound darkness, would represent an unprecedented environmental shockwave, setting off a chain reaction across every facet of our world. The sudden absolute darkness would not merely be an absence of light, it would be a psychological weapon, triggering an immediate and widespread global panic. Imagine the sheer terror. One moment, the familiar warmth and light of day; the next, an impenetrable, suffocating blackness descends without warning. Eyes, accustomed to processing visual cues, would be rendered useless, plunging billions into a primal fear response. This isn't the gentle transition of dusk. It's an instantaneous deletion of our primary sense, a visceral assault on our understanding of reality. Societies, built on established routines, visual navigation, and the comforting predictability of day and night, would instantly fracture. The collective scream of disorientation would be deafening, even if unheard. People would stumble, fall, and collide in the streets, in their homes, in their workplaces. Emergency services, suddenly blind, would be overwhelmed before they could even begin to respond. The initial minutes would be chaos, pure, unadulterated pandemonium as humanity grappled with the unthinkable. As the psychological shock reverberates, the very infrastructure that underpins modern life would begin its rapid collapse. The most immediate and obvious casualty would be solar power. Every solar panel on Earth, from the smallest rooftop installation to the vast utility-scale farms, would instantly cease generating electricity. This sudden massive loss of a significant power source would send immediate shockwaves through national grids. While conventional power plants, coal, nuclear, hydroelectric, don't rely on sunlight directly, they are not designed to handle such an abrupt and gargantuan shift in demand. As billions instinctively reach for light switches, desperately trying to pierce the gloom, the demand for artificial light would surge astronomically. Power grids, already reeling from the loss of solar input, would be pushed past their breaking point. Circuit breakers would trip, generators would overload, and cascading failures would plunge entire regions into a darkness far deeper than the initial solar absence, a darkness now compounded by the failure of our own technology. Blackouts would become widespread, not just because of the sun's disappearance, but because our existing systems are simply not robust enough to absorb such an unprecedented shock. Simultaneously, the vital arteries of global communication, would begin to seize up. Many satellite systems, critical for everything from GPS navigation to global internet and television broadcasts, are designed to orient themselves relative to the sun for power generation and thermal regulation. The sudden absence of this primary reference point, coupled with the rapid temperature fluctuations in the upper atmosphere, would cause immediate malfunctions and potential failures. Even those not directly solar-powered would face unprecedented environmental stress. Ground-based communication networks, already struggling with the widespread power outages, would quickly follow. Cell towers would run out of battery backup, fiber optic networks would lose power to their repeaters, and data centers, starved of electricity and cooling, would go offline. The world would not just be dark, it would be silent. No phone calls, no internet, no radio, no television. Just the chilling, suffocating quiet of a planet suddenly cut off from itself, its billions of inhabitants isolated in their fear and confusion. The very conduits of information, essential for coordination, reassurance, and survival, would become useless. Society would be blind, cold, and utterly alone, a profound silence descending upon a world accustomed to the constant hum of connectivity. This silence would amplify the panic, fostering rumors, misinformation, and an even deeper sense of terrifying isolation. The silence, once a profound amplification of panic, would quickly deepen into an ecological trauma of unimaginable scale. Even 10 minutes of solar absence, a blink in geological time, would initiate a catastrophic chain reaction across Earth's delicate ecosystems. Photosynthesis, the very engine of terrestrial life, would grind to an immediate halt. While trees and plants wouldn't instantly wither and die, the sudden cessation of energy production would trigger stress responses, impacting metabolic processes crucial for survival. Microscopic organisms in oceans, the foundation of marine food webs and significant contributors to global oxygen production, would experience an immediate and profound shock. Phytoplankton, driven by sunlight, would cease their vital work, threatening a cascading collapse throughout aquatic ecosystems. The ripple effect, though not fully observable in those 10 minutes, would be set in motion, promising long-term disruptions to food chains across the planet. This biological shockwave would translate directly into an agricultural catastrophe. Modern agriculture, a marvel of human ingenuity, is deeply intertwined with the sun's rhythms. Even a brief, unexpected period of darkness would disrupt delicate growth cycles. Crops, whether in fields or greenhouses, would be plunged into an artificial night, upsetting photoreceptors and internal clocks. While a 10-minute interruption might not cause immediate crop death, it would introduce a profound stressor, potentially affecting yields, nutrient absorption, and overall plant health in the crucial days and weeks that follow. For systems relying on precisely timed artificial lighting or controlled environments, the sudden power outages would be devastating, leading to widespread spoilage and loss. The world's delicate food supply chains, already under pressure from climate change and geopolitical instability, would face an unprecedented, instantaneous shock. The long-term implications for global food security, even from such a short event, would be staggering, leading to potential famines in regions already struggling. Beyond the biological and agricultural spheres, the world's transportation systems would come to an immediate grinding halt. Imagine the skies. Thousands of aircraft, from commercial airliners to cargo planes, suddenly flying blind. Pilots rely not only on visual cues but also on sophisticated instruments that are often GPS dependent. With satellite systems failing and ground-based navigation aids losing power, air traffic control would descend into chaos. Mid-air collisions, once a highly improbable nightmare, would become a terrifying possibility. Planes would be forced to attempt emergency landings without proper guidance, turning runways into potential disaster zones. On the seas, vast container ships and passenger ferries would lose their GPS signals, their radar systems, and often their communication capabilities. Navigating the world's oceans, already a complex endeavor, would become perilous. Collisions and groundings would become inevitable as vessels drift without guidance, threatening global trade and marine ecosystems. Harbors, usually bustling hubs of activity, would fall silent, their cranes and loading systems paralyzed by power outages, and on land, the intricate dance of ground transport would cease. Traffic lights would go dark, plunging intersections into anarchic free-for-alls. GPS-guided vehicles, from personal cars to delivery trucks, would lose their way. Railways, dependent on complex signaling systems and electrical power for many of their trains, would stop dead. Tunnels would become pitch black, trapping passengers and cargo. The global economy, reliant on the constant, precise movement of goods and people, would suffer an instantaneous, complete paralysis. The world, connected by an intricate web of transportation networks, would suddenly stop moving, its arteries clogged, its heart unable to beat. This paralysis would not just be an inconvenience. It would be a profound and immediate threat to rescue efforts, supply chains, and the very ability of societies to respond to the unfolding catastrophe. The sheer, unadulterated shock of sudden, absolute darkness, coupled with the profound silence as technology fails, would unleash a primal fear unlike anything humanity has ever collectively experienced. Forget the technical failures, the ecological collapses, or the transportation woes for a moment. Focus instead on the human element, the raw, unfiltered psychological impact. Mass hysteria would not be an isolated incident, it would be a global phenomenon. Imagine millions, billions, suddenly plunged into an inky blackness, their familiar world ripped away without warning. The thin veneer of civilization, built on centuries of social contracts and perceived security, would begin to crack, revealing the chaotic undercurrents that always lie just beneath the surface. In the initial moments, widespread panic would morph into disorientation. People would be lost in their own homes, unable to navigate familiar streets. The immediate response would be a desperate search for light, any light. Phones, flashlights, candles, matches, anything to pierce the oppressive gloom. But as batteries drain and power grids remain stubbornly silent, the realization would dawn. This isn't a temporary blackout. This is something far more profound. With communication networks down, rumors and misinformation would spread like wildfire, fueled by terror and the absence of verifiable information. The lack of reliable news would amplify fear, turning neighbor against neighbor, community against community. The breakdown of law and order would be swift and brutal in many places. Police forces, themselves grappling with the same disorienting darkness and personal fear, would be overwhelmed. Their vehicles, if operational, would struggle through chaotic streets. Emergency services, already stretched thin by the immediate consequences of the sun's disappearance, would be unable to respond to the myriad cries for help. In this vacuum, opportunistic individuals and groups would seize power, preying on the vulnerable. Looting, violence, and general lawlessness would become rampant as the desperate scramble for survival overrides societal norms. Resource hoarding would become an immediate, instinctual response. Food, water, and most critically sources of light and warmth would become the new currency. Stores would be emptied, homes ransacked. The collective good would quickly give way to individual or familial survival, leading to localized conflicts over dwindling supplies. Those with generators or stockpiled goods would become targets, their resources coveted by the increasingly desperate masses. The very fabric of community, so often celebrated in times of peace, would be torn apart by the harsh realities of a world without light or warmth. Perhaps most chillingly, our urban centers, the gleaming symbols of human progress and ingenuity, would quickly transform into death traps. Designed for constant illumination, climate control, and the seamless flow of energy, these concrete jungles would become cold, dark, and dangerous labyrinths. High-rise buildings, once beacons of commerce and residence, would become vertical tombs without elevators or emergency lighting. Subways would trap commuters in underground tunnels. Hospitals, even with backup generators, would struggle to maintain critical life support systems and perform complex procedures in the dark. The sheer concentration of people in these areas, usually an advantage, would become a profound liability, exacerbating the spread of panic and making rescue efforts virtually impossible. The unpreparedness of our infrastructure, always assumed to be robust, would be laid bare. Our smart cities, so reliant on digital networks and constant power, would revert to a pre-industrial state, but without the inherent resilience of simpler societies. The illusion of control, fostered by technological advancement, would vanish, replaced by a stark, terrifying reality. Humanity, for all its innovations, remains fundamentally vulnerable to the forces of the cosmos. The 10 minutes of darkness would not just be an external event. It would be an internal one, stripping away our carefully constructed realities and forcing us to confront the raw, untamed aspects of human nature under extreme duress. The sun, that magnificent, life-giving star, would inevitably reappear. Its first rays, piercing through the lingering pre-dawn gloom, would not be greeted with universal relief, but with a profound, unsettling silence. The world it illuminated would be profoundly, irrevocably altered. The immediate damage would be colossal. A grim tapestry woven from frozen pipes, shattered infrastructure, and the silent, still forms of those who succumb to the sudden cold or the ensuing chaos. Recovery efforts would not merely be about rebuilding, they would be about rediscovering how to function in a world where the very bedrock of stability had been violently shaken. The scale of the task would be staggering, demanding a global response unlike anything ever witnessed, yet hampered by the very networks that had just failed. This 10-minute blackout, a fleeting cosmic blink, would lay bare the extreme fragility of our interconnected global systems. From the intricate web of energy grids that power our cities to the just-in-time logistics that feed our populations, every single dependency would be brutally exposed. The seamless flow of goods, information, and people, a hallmark of modern civilization, would be revealed as a delicate house of cards, collapsing under the slightest, unexpected tremor. Our reliance on technology, once a source of pride and progress, would be seen through the lens of vulnerability. The very systems designed to optimize and connect us would prove to be our Achilles heel, concentrating risk rather than distributing it. Beyond the immediate physical and technological devastation, the event would trigger an unprecedented political and economic reckoning. The global markets, already prone to volatility, would experience a cataclysmic collapse. Trillions would be wiped out in moments as confidence evaporated, supply chains fractured, and the future became terrifyingly uncertain. The finger-pointing would begin almost immediately. Who was accountable for such a catastrophic lack of preparedness? Governments would face an existential crisis, their legitimacy undermined by their inability to protect their citizens from an event deemed impossible. International relations, already strained, would descend into a desperate scramble for remaining resources, potentially igniting new conflicts or escalating existing ones. The geopolitical landscape would be redrawn, not by treaties or diplomacy, but by the raw, unvarnished power dynamics of survival. Nations with greater resilience, or those less reliant on the most vulnerable systems, might emerge with a newfound, albeit grim, advantage. The very concept of normalcy would be shattered. The experience would leave an indelible scar on the collective psyche of humanity. Future generations would grow up in the shadow of the Great Darkness, a stark reminder of humanity's precarious position in the cosmos. Every infrastructure project, every energy policy, every contingency plan would be viewed through the prism of those 10 minutes. The event would force a fundamental reevaluation of our priorities, our values, and our relationship with the natural world. It would highlight the dangers of complacency and the hubris of assuming perpetual stability. The world would be forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that for all our advancements, we are still intrinsically tethered to the whims of a universe far grander and more indifferent than we often care to admit. The aftershocks of the sun's brief disappearance would resonate for decades, possibly centuries, shaping the trajectory of human civilization in ways we can scarcely imagine. The memory of absolute darkness would become a cautionary tale, a constant whisper of the abyss that lies just beyond the comforting glow of our everyday lives. The true what if isn't merely the sun going dark for 10 minutes. It's our collective blindness to the systemic risks that such an event would inevitably expose. We often focus on the spectacular, the immediate catastrophe, without truly grappling with the underlying fragilities that make us so vulnerable. The sun's disappearance would be a trigger, yes, but the real disaster would be the unraveling of a civilization built upon assumptions of unending stability, infinite resources, and an unwavering natural order. It would be the stark, painful revelation of how precariously balanced our interconnected world truly is, a house of cards waiting for the slightest, most improbable gust of wind. This thought experiment isn't about predicting a celestial anomaly. It's about dissecting the hidden vulnerabilities within our own creations. Why are resources so rarely allocated to preparing for events deemed too improbable, even when their potential impact is undeniably catastrophic? It's a question that plagues disaster preparedness experts and futurists alike. The answer often lies in a complex interplay of economic incentives, political expediency, and human psychology. Investing in resilience for a scenario with a 1-in-a-million chance feels wasteful when immediate, tangible problems demand attention. Politicians prioritize visible, short-term gains, while the long-term, low-probability, high-impact threats are relegated to obscure reports gathering dust. We are hardwired to dismiss what seems unlikely, to rationalize away the truly terrifying possibilities, preferring the comforting illusion of control. This cognitive bias, this collective shrug at the impossible, becomes a far greater threat than any cosmic event, leaving us exposed and unprepared when the unfathomable finally arrives. The cost of this deliberate oversight, this willful ignorance, would be measured not just in dollars, but in lives, in shattered societies, and in the very fabric of our shared future. The 10 minutes of darkness would strip away all pretense, revealing the raw power dynamics of survival, control, and the inherent vulnerabilities of a civilization built on assumptions of constant stability. In that terrifying void, the carefully constructed hierarchies would crumble. The powerful, accustomed to their influence, would find their authority meaningless without light, communication, or functioning infrastructure. The vulnerable, already marginalized, would face an even more brutal struggle for existence. It would be a stark, Darwinian test, not of individual strength, but of collective resilience or lack thereof. The event would expose who truly holds the levers of power when the systems they control cease to function. It would highlight the profound chasm between those with access to shielded bunkers and emergency generators and the billions who would be plunged into absolute, unforgiving chaos. This isn't merely a thought experiment about a celestial body. It's a mirror reflecting our own societal blind spots. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our dependencies, our priorities, and our collective capacity for both foresight and denial. The sun's return would not erase the lessons learned in its absence. Instead, it would illuminate a world forever altered, a humanity forced to reckon with its own fragile existence. The memory of those 10 minutes, a fleeting cosmic whisper, would echo through generations, a chilling reminder that the greatest threats often lie not in the stars, but in the unexamined foundations of our own making.